Okay, let's dive right into this. Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a truly fascinating subject, Deepa Mehta's cinematic adaptation of Salman Rushdie's masterpiece, Midnight's Children. What's absolutely incredible about this story is how it uses one single, totally fictional plot twist, a secret baby swap in a hospital, to explain these massive, real-world historical truths about identity, colonialism, and the literal birth of a nation. It's a brilliant look at how the stories we're told shape exactly who we become, so let's get into it. Here's our quick roadmap for today's intellectual journey. We'll start with Section 1, the Midnight Switch. Then, Section 2, Constructing the Imagined Nation. Section 3, Saleem, Shiva, and Dislocation. Section 4, Bhabha's Third Space. And we'll wrap up with Section 5, The Power of Hybridity. But before we even get to the plot itself, I want you to think about a really profound question. Who actually narrates history? Is it the victors or the marginalized? Well, historically, it's almost always the victors, right? The powerful, the colonizers. They control the written records, the schools, the institutions, so their version of events basically becomes the official record. But think about how deeply that impacts the personal identity of the marginalized. If you only ever learn your own history through the eyes of the people who conquered you, you might completely internalize a distorted, inferior image of yourself. It's really only when marginalized groups reclaim their own history that dignity and a truer sense of identity are finally restored. I want you to keep that concept of reclaiming the narrative in the back of your mind as we move forward. All right, let's jump straight into Section 1, the Midnight Switch. Now, what's really interesting about this sequence of events is just how tightly packed it is. Just think about this timeline. At 11:59 p.m., British rule officially ends. Literally 1 minute later, at exactly midnight, the nation of India gains its independence, and at that very same stroke of midnight, two babies, Saleem and Shiva, are born in a Bombay hospital. But then, fast forward just 5 minutes to 12:05 a.m., a nurse named Mary Pereira commits this private, life-altering act of rebellion and deliberately switches the babies. These three events, all happening in a tiny 5-minute window at midnight, literally set the foundation for the entire narrative. And you have to look at the immediate fallout of that switch, because the stark contrast between our two main characters is wild. Saleem is, biologically speaking, the child of a poor street performer and an Englishman. But because of this switch, he grows up wealthy in an English-influenced Muslim household. On the flip side, you have Shiva. Shiva is biologically the child of this wealthy Muslim family, but he is raised in absolute poverty, out on the streets. It's a massive clash between their lived realities and their biological realities. This switch creates literal hybridity. Neither boy is a pure product of his class, his religion, or his culture. They are entirely walking contradictions. Moving right along, let's zoom out a bit for Section 2, Constructing the Imagined Nation. To really understand the backdrop of this story, we kind of have to ask ourselves, what actually makes a nation? We can break it down into four main pillars: geography, which gives a nation its physical territory; governance, which provides the structure and the law; culture, giving people a shared language and identity. But it is that fourth pillar, memory, that is absolutely the most vital. While land and government physically build a nation, it's shared memory, a shared sense of history, and a feeling of belonging that actually holds people together emotionally. And this perfectly aligns with a crucial sociological framework by a scholar named Benedict Anderson. He coined this brilliant term, imagined community. Anderson basically theorized that a nation is a socially constructed community. It's imagined by the people who perceive themselves as part of that group, even though, let's be real, they will never meet everyone in it. Think about your own country for a second. You're never going to meet millions of your fellow citizens, yet you feel deeply connected to them because you share the same history, the same symbols, the same stories. It's this incredibly powerful psychological bond that links millions of total strangers. Which brings us nicely to Section 3, Saleem, Shiva, and Dislocation. So the crucial point here is that this baby swap isn't just some clever, dramatic soap opera twist. It is a direct metaphor for colonialism and the 1947 partition of India. Just as the nurse completely scrambled those babies' identities, partition literally scrambled borders. It triggered one of the largest mass migrations in human history, violently displacing millions of people from land they truly thought was intrinsically theirs. Identities and borders that people just assumed were natural and completely fixed were suddenly carved up overnight. And this leaves our protagonist, Saleem, with a massive symbolic burden. As he notes in the story, he is handcuffed to history. Because he was born at the exact stroke of midnight, his fractured, hybrid, totally contradictory identity perfectly mirrors the newborn nation of India itself. He is a mix of a colonial past and an independent future, entirely bound to the destiny of his country. When we look at Saleem and Shiva side by side, it's like looking at the two competing faces of a newborn nation. Saleem is the reflective, storytelling side. He's desperately trying to make sense of all these overlapping histories. Shiva, on the other hand, is forged in raw deprivation and street survival. He represents the aggressive, power-seeking, militaristic side. They are essentially two halves of the postcolonial coin. Okay, on to the climax of our analysis. Section 4, Bhabha's third space. To make total sense of this dislocation, we turn to this brilliant concept called the third space, coined by scholar Homi Bhabha. Bhabha argues that colonial encounters don't just leave two pure cultures, like the colonizer and the colonized, sitting neatly side by side. Not at all. Instead, they produce a brand new in-between zone. In this third space, neither culture remains pure. They mix together to create entirely new hybrid identities. It's a space where cultural meaning is constantly being negotiated, rather than just being permanently fixed by the past. Let's move to and see how this builds into our characters, because Saleem perfectly personifies this third space. Think about it. He's not just Indian or English. He's not simply rich or poor, and he definitely isn't simply the son of his biological parents or his adoptive ones. He exists entirely in the overlap, and here is the absolute genius of it. His lack of a fixed identity isn't a weakness at all. His unique voice and his entire storytelling power emerge precisely from this in-between state. Because he is everything at once, he can literally speak for everyone. Finally, let's bring it all home with Section 5, the power of hybridity. And this brilliantly illustrates the core thesis of the whole story. The traditional view usually looks at hybridity as a tragedy, right? Like it's a source of deep confusion and a loss of your true, authentic self. But the film completely flips this on its head. The film views hybridity as a source of massive narrative power, of profound telepathic connection, and of endless creative possibility. Instead of treating Saleem's mixed origins like a wound, the film shows it as a superpower. It is the very thing that allows him to represent a beautifully plural, totally diverse nation. We see this generative, creative hybridity all throughout the source material. A really great example is the decolonizing of the English language itself. After independence, Indians didn't just toss English out the window. Writers like Salman Rushdie and Arundhati Roy totally transformed it. They reclaimed the language of the colonizer, mixed it with Indian rhythms and expressions, and basically made it entirely their own. Similarly, in the story, Saleem uses his in-between nature to form this amazing telepathic connection with all the other children born at midnight, mentally uniting Hindu, Muslim, rich, and poor all across the country. This perfectly captures the ultimate stakes of our explainer today. If you look at the concept of purity, the absolute insistence on a pure bloodline or a pure religion, it resulted in the horrors of partition, massive communal conflict, and just staggering violence. The film flat out rejects the idea of purity as a highly dangerous fiction. On the other hand, hybridity results in narrative authority, unity in diversity, and powerful adaptation. The film fully embraces hybridity as the true, messy, but ultimately beautiful post-colonial reality. Which brings us to a final thought for you to ponder today. Is the search for a pure identity always a fiction? It's a pretty provocative question, isn't it? When we look at history through the lens of Midnight's Children, we see that trying to force people into neat, unmixed categories just causes immense pain. The true potential of identity, both for nations and for us as individuals, lies not in resisting hybridity, but in fully embracing the messy, beautiful in-between. Thank you so much for exploring this with me today. Keep asking questions, keep looking at the overlap, and I really hope you walk away seeing the world just a little bit differently.